Hey everyone, today I want to talk about something that I have thought about a lot as a guitar player. When people say that tone comes from the hands of the player, what does that actually mean, and is there any truth to that claim? Some people will argue that it's entirely your guitar, your pickups, your amps, your pedals, your cabs, mics that make up your tone. Others will argue that it all comes from your hands. And there are people like me who are sort of in the middle and believe it's some combination of both of those things. So I personally do believe that there is truth to the claim that tone comes from the hands of the player, but there is some confusion about what that actually means. So allow me to do my best to clarify here. When people say tone is in the hands of the player, they are not referring to the tonal characteristics of that person's fingertips. You'd think that would be an obvious thing to point out, but I see a worrying amount of guitar players online who take the tone is in your hands argument way too literally. So they're not talking about the tonal characteristics of the player's hand. They're talking about things like dynamics, pick attack, where you pick in relation to where your pickups are, when you choose to roll off the tone or the volume. Yeah, basically things that you control with your hands. If you've been watching my channel for some time, you'll know that I do artist-inspired lessons on some of my favorite players, and in these videos I often open by playing a section of a well-known tune by that particular guitar player. And I do make an effort to mimic the overall sound of that player, and there are two parts to this. One is the gear that I use, and the other is the way that I play. The latter is what I think about and consider the most when making these videos. The gear takes me all of 5 or 10 minutes to decide on. I use a Fractal Audio Axe FX2, which is, your standard sort of preamp that contains very convincing amp, cabinet, mic, and pedal emulations. And I also own what are arguably the 3 must-have electrics: Strat, Tele, and Les Paul. I'm not trying to brag here, I'm just saying that because of the gear that I own, I'm able to cover a lot of ground when it comes to tone. But it's things like the way I attack certain notes, when I alter my dynamics, when I pick closer to the bridge or further away from it, when I roll my volume pot down. These are the variables that I'm spending most of my time and energy concentrating on when I'm, making these artist-inspired lessons, because I truly believe that they contribute more to the overall tone that I'm emulating than the gear that I'm actually using. For example, I recently made a video about Gary Moore, and I got a few comments about the tone that I used on that video. People asked me, how did you get Gary's tone? And the answer is, I didn't, really. For that Gary Moore song that I was playing over in that video, his rig would have consisted of a Les Paul into a Marshall JCM 2000 or JCM 800, probably with a tube screamer in front as well, and maybe some reverb and delay. What I used was my Les Paul. I used my Axe FX2 with a preset which was based on the clean channel of a Bogner Shiva, so not a Marshall, and then I used a Sur Eclipse distortion pedal in front of the Axe FX, and some reverb and delay. So other than the Les Paul, nothing about that rig was similar to Gary's. I was just using a high gain sound. So when people ask me how it is that I nailed that player's tone, I really believe that that's more of a response to the way that I change my playing characteristics, my dynamics, the way I attack certain notes, than it is a response to the gear that I'm using and the sound I get, the tone I get with the gear that I use. I think a better example of this would be SRV. I made a video about him as well, and Stevie had some very identifiable playing characteristics. He would pick some notes very aggressively and others gently. He would rake the strings, all sorts of techniques like that. So here's Texas Flood played twice with the exact same rig. The first time you hear it, I'm going to make a real effort to emulate Stevie's playing style, and the second time you hear it, I'm just going to play it flat. So I'm going to use minimal dynamic variation, which basically means I'm not going to change my pick attack very much at all. So even though I used the exact same rig and the exact same settings in both of those clips, hopefully you could tell that the first one sounded closer to Stevie than the second one. And that was because I was making an effort to emulate his playing style and not just his rig. So if you've been trying to get that Stevie Ray Vaughan sound and you've maybe got a Strat, a Fendery sort of tube amp, and a tube screamer, which would get you pretty close to Stevie's sound, but it's just not happening for you, perhaps it's because you're more concerned with the gear you're using than the way you play. To me personally, dynamics, pick attack, and playing accuracy, meaning sloppy to tight, those are the three main variables behind the tone is in the hands argument. You could spend a lot of time analyzing and incorporating Stevie's dynamics and pick attack into your own playing. You could do that, plug into an affordable amp like a Boss Katana, for example, and you could get a pretty convincing Stevie Ray Vaughan tone. You don't need expensive gear to get a good convincing tone. Yes, I'm saying that as someone who does own expensive and affordable gear, but I truly believe that those three variables matter more than how expensive or how rare your gear is. Take that PRS John Mayer amp as an example. I think it's called the J mod or something like that, but in the UK that retailed for about £7,000. Really, really expensive amp. And I'm sure it sounds amazing when John Mayer plugs into it because he's an experienced player. He knows how to get the best out of any amp, any pedal. You get the idea. But take a less experienced player, maybe a beginner who's been playing for like 4 weeks or something, someone who's not had a lot of experience with different types of gear, different types of guitars and amps, plug them into a £7,000 amp and see if it sounds like a £7,000 amp. In my opinion, good experienced players can make good or average gear sound amazing, and less experienced players, people who haven't had a lot of experience with different types of gear, who maybe don't know how to control like feedback or how to control and tame the output of a high gain amp, those kinds of players can sometimes take amazing expensive gear and make it sound cheap. So to conclude this video, you don't need expensive gear to get a good tone. Yes, it can certainly help you if you're a good experienced player, but to me it's more about what you're able to do with your hands when it comes to dynamics and pick attack and accuracy of playing. It's more about that than it is the gear that you use. Those variables, dynamics, pick attack, accuracy of playing, to me those are what make you sound like you regardless of what amp you're plugged into. Tone is in the hands, you just might have to work on it for a while before you realize it. Alright guys, thank you for watching this video. I know this might be a bit of a controversial one, so if you disagree with me or you agree with me or you're somewhere in the middle and you can't decide, leave a comment below and we'll get a bit of a discussion going on this topic. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up below and click subscribe for more. And I'll see you guys soon.